Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now, as regular listeners will know by now, I'm passionate about finding new stories to share about how people are both thinking differently and leveraging technology to solve real problems. And I also love exploring tech startup stories from all over the world, especially outside of Silicon Valley, and hearing about vibrant tech startup scenes that are emerging. And guess what? Today we have all that and much, much more. Because today I want to learn more about a company called DRONAMICS, and they're on a mission to democratize airfreight and lower the cost of shipping in emerging markets. And to achieve this, they're developing a new type of cargo plane. But here's the cool bit. It's small, it's unmanned, and extremely fuel efficient. It can transport 350 kg over 2,500 kilometres for a cost that's 50% lower than any other aircraft. And of course, it flies autonomously. It can be monitored and managed remotely, all through satellites. And the whole system actually costs less than a sports car. Now, when I first heard about this, I thought, this doesn't sound possible. But they keep proving that it is. And they've called this aircraft the Black Swan, and it can land on short and unpaved runways, enabling on-demand, point-to-point flights and speedy same-day delivery, even to the most remote locations. The kind of locations I'm talking about is the kind that would take days to reach over ground or sea. So essentially, they're using technology to solve very, very real problems. When I was researching them, they were starting with domestic air networks in Africa, Asia and Latin American countries, with fleets of the Black Swan taking advantage of a multitude of small airfields that are often unused. So I always say on this show that technology works best when it brings people together. So in this case, using autonomous aircraft and partnering with local industry to provide a valuable lifeline of getting goods in and out of small remote mountainous or island communities within hours at a cost that is often below even road transportation. That is my kind of language. I mean, a technology that can transform whole economies? It doesn't get much better than that. And this company is also based in Sofia in Bulgaria. But today's guest is waiting for us all the way in Cape Town, South Africa, where he's spreading the word about what they're doing with DRONAMICS. But I was able to get him out of the conference just for a few moments so he can come and speak with us today. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Cape Town in South Africa so we can speak with the co-founder of DRONAMICS. So, massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about DRONAMICS, where you're based, and what your company's mission is?
Sure thing. My name is Svilen Rangelov. I'm one of the two founders of DRONAMICS. I founded it with my brother, Konstantin, 4.5 years ago. And our purpose and mission is to develop a new type of unmanned aircraft that is specifically designed for cargo, in order to make cargo a lot more efficient than it currently is. We're based out of Sofia, Bulgaria. We have a presence in London as well, and our markets are all across Africa, Asia, the Americas, the Middle East. It's basically trying to transform the logistics networks of mostly emerging markets, but also large countries, large in both the geographic and economic sense.
And a couple of problems that I'd like to address and just educate the listeners about here is, can you describe the challenges with delivering air cargo today? For example, I read, I think it was in Wired, where you stated that most small delivery drones are an attempt to solve the last mile problem. They are the bike messenger and we are the cross-country truck. But what did you mean by that?
What I mean is that there's a variety of ways for you to do the last mile, to do the final delivery between, let's say, the shop and the customer's address, or the distribution point and the customer's address. But when you look at a country, for example, South Africa, okay, South Africa has a thriving economy, and but for a lot of the goods that they import, they all come through Johannesburg, and then they get redistributed throughout the country, because you have consumers all over the place, not just in the capital. And it will be very inefficient if you just keep putting them on trucks, in the sense that, yes, it will take it will be cheap, but it will take a long time. What we're trying to do is to create those new city pairs that are not able to exist right now, because currently aviation uses the most expensive and the biggest type of vehicles and delivers them only between the most expensive and biggest type of real estate, the airports, the main big airports around the world. So from most of the cargo's perspective, the occasion in which a package would touch an airplane and the part of the journey that is carried by air is very small. To give you some numbers, less than 1% of global trade is carried by airplanes. So 99 times out of 100, the shippers say, no, please do not put my package on an airplane because it's too expensive, or because the flights, are not where I need them to be, or the timetables are not when I need them to be. In South Africa, again, for every kilogram that flies, you have 10,000 kilograms that travel by road. So there's tremendous room for growth if one was to able to use a new type of vehicle, one that is small, one that is fuel efficient, one that is ultimately cheap. So that's why we said we need a new type of aircraft that is cheaper to produce and cheaper to operate, so that we can unlock these, less traveled destinations, these tier 2 cities that they don't have the main highways connecting to them, and so on.
And as a result of that, you developed the Black Swan cargo aircraft to address these exact challenges. So can you describe the aircraft and what makes it different from any other drone that people listening may be thinking about?
You see a lot of these flying taxis right now, Uber and a lot of companies are, showcasing every week a new type of vehicle that's supposed to be carrying people by air. We look quite conventional. We are an aircraft that looks like an airplane. It's a fixed wing, so we need a runway to take off and we need a runway to land. And that's precisely why we are going after the middle mile market, not the last mile. Yeah. And so the reason we do that is because horizontal flight is takes much less energy than vertical. And again, cargo owners don't care if you use a donkey, if you use a drone, if you use an airplane. They just want the goods as quickly and as cheaply as possible. So the customer is not going to tolerate absurd costs because of these new fancy technologies. So what you need to deliver to them is new technology at the cost of old one, which is tremendously hard. So if you were to go on our website, you can see what the aircraft looks like. It looks like a regular aircraft, except that it's unmanned. Now, we chose the payload to be 350 kilograms precisely because we don't do the last mile. So we asked ourselves, okay, what is the most common vehicle in the whole world to do the last mile? And all these like small utility vans, kind of like the Renault Kangoo, the Ford Transit Connect, the ones that are basically city vans. And we said, let's have our aircraft match one of these, because currently you have very big airplanes which unload their cargo on a bunch of 18-wheelers, but the 18-wheeler itself cannot really stop in front of my apartment building and cannot do that last mile. So it itself has to make an additional stop and hand over again the cargo to those smaller vans anyway. So we just said, let's cut that part. Let's just skip it and let's just distribute the cargo from the beginning between these small aircraft, because the packages are smaller than that anyway. So that's why we chose 350 kilograms as our payload. And the range, we can cover 2,500 kilometers, because the markets that we are going to operate in Africa, Asia, Latin America, the distances are vastly larger than the distances in Europe. So, it's a lot more meaningful to offer long range.
And I'll add a video to the blog post that accompanies this podcast over at techblogwriter.co.uk, just so people can actually see what it looks like, because the Black Swan is no ordinary drone, and it's an aircraft that could fundamentally change the shipping industry. But I've got to ask, I mean, what types of cargo are optimal for the Black Swan, and are there any particular markets that you're focusing on?
So we designed it mostly for e-commerce, because we asked ourselves, okay, if you live in a big city, all your needs can be satisfied that same day, right? But if you live outside of the big cities, if you live in small towns, small cities, remote areas, then everything gets there longer than one day, right? So, but all these communities, they also are smaller. So the capacity is going there will be small, which means that you're not going to be shipping full pallets of the same thing. You're going to be shipping individual packages. A package for me, a package for you, a package for your neighbor, which makes the cargo very big in terms of volume, but low in density. So that's another reason why we didn't simply take an existing aircraft like a Cessna or a Piper. We didn't just like put an autopilot on an existing aircraft, because they were made always with passengers in mind, and human density is much different than e-commerce density. So our aircraft, besides being able to carry 350 kilos, it can also fit actually the volume 350 kilos e-commerce packages. So that's about 3.5 cubic meters. And other than e-commerce, other verticals we're looking at are medical and pharmaceutical delivery. So medical supplies, vaccines, medication, and also agricultural equipment, agricultural produce, and spare parts and urgent equipment. So, for example, when you have a production line and if it breaks, or even actually for big aircraft, when they have some maintenance issue, every minute, every hour costs a lot of money, so they need to expedite that spare part that they're missing. In terms of pharmaceutical and medical delivery, it's pretty obvious. You can skip a large part of the ground transport just by flying it. You can get there earlier. It can have a more positive patient outcome. And then in terms of agriculture, in a lot of markets around the world, spoilage with any perishable is a big thing. So the saying goes how in Africa you need to pick 12 roses so that 8 survive the journey to Amsterdam. And the problem never happens on the airplane, because in the big airplanes, the international flights, they're climate controlled, and on the big airports, they're in climate controlled warehouses and so on. So it's always been a question of that journey from the farm to the capital airport. So if we can deliver that quickly and cheaply, and we can control the climate inside of the aircraft, then that's a big value add for agricultural producers. We can take off from the farm, literally, because our aircraft can land on unpaved surfaces, so we can land on grass. We just need about 400 meters of runway space.
And you said you just need 400 meters of runway space. So the next question has got to be, how much does it cost? I mean, where are you today in terms of production, and how soon do you envision the Black Swan actually being put out there into service? Our
cost is between 50 and 80% lower than other air cargo. So if the airline can is charging $2, we can charge 60 cents or less for the same amount of cargo going the same amount of distance. And that's pretty transformation, because not only are you able to send small capacities, which you would never do with a big airplane, because no one wants to fly half empty, but also whatever you send, your cost base will be significantly lower. And typically it's a very low margin business. So a 50% reduction in the cost base is tremendous. In terms of the level that we are right now building a full-scale prototype that we'll be testing next year in the UK. We will also be doing tests in Asia and Africa next year. We've validated the performance, we've validated the aerodynamics, communication, the small-scale model. So now we're just building the full-scale one.
And you founded a company with your brother. So can you tell me a little bit more about your backgrounds and why you decided to actually go out there and fund DRONAMICS? And have you always had a fascination with aviation?
We've always been fascinated by aviation. My brother is actually an aerospace engineer. And when we saw the Amazon drones being unveiled 5 years ago, we realized that, okay, the technology is clearly there. We know that even passenger flights are already heavily software supported and automated. So we thought, okay, who is going to benefit the most? It's not really going to be that small delivery drone user, because that typically replaces a delivery guy. Yes, in some cases where it's really urgent and it's medical delivery like they do right now in Rwanda and so on, it's vital. There's no other way. You have to do that. But for most other things, a delivery guy on a motorbike is just as fine. So we looked at where the missing link is, and that's why we decided to focus on that. And when we spoke to a few people from the industry, they gave us faith that this is achievable. And there's also a personal element to it, because growing up in Bulgaria, we experienced firsthand all the transition from a centrally planned economy, which is what Bulgaria had during communism for almost 50 years, and then it had to transition to a capitalist, democracy. And for a while, the whole turbulent events in the Balkans in the 90s, they really hit hard Bulgaria's economy. There was hyperinflation, there were runs on the bank and so on. So it was quite painful. And everyone in the country, us included, were very acutely aware how when you're on the periphery, you always end up paying more, which is ironic and quite unfair, but it's a function of simple mathematics, right? So somebody in Germany pays less for their food than somebody in Bulgaria, where incomes are much lower. And we call this the remoteness tax. So this is what we wanted to fight. So that's the personal element. We want to be able to make sure that supply chains are optimized and to other populations.
And I'm glad you mentioned your upbringing in Bulgaria there, because you are based in Sofia, and I understand that the Black Swan is the first aircraft designed in Bulgaria in 70 years. So what's the startup climate like in Sofia that enables you to found such an impressive aerospace startup?
Well, Bulgaria actually had a very interesting history with aviation, because in the early 20th century, Bulgaria was a pioneer in aviation. The first military airport in the whole world was in Bulgaria in 1912. It was before the First World War. The first female pilot was Bulgarian. The first landing with the engine failure, successful landing, was made by a Bulgarian pilot. So Bulgaria was thriving. It had an industry of quite sizable industry. There were more than 40 different designs created over 30 years in 3 different factories up until the Second World War. And after the Second World War, Bulgaria became part of the Eastern Bloc and was forced to close down these factories and start, buying aircraft from the Soviet Union. So it was the industry itself didn't really exist for 70 years, and we thought that this shouldn't be something that should stop us, because what we're trying to achieve is not just in terms of aircraft manufacturing, but there's a lot of on the software side as well. And that's where Bulgaria is very strong. Bulgaria, for the past 10 years, has really established itself as the Silicon Valley of Eastern Europe, because there's a tremendous, number of really smart software developers who work for all kinds of companies. I mean, the first office of Uber, the first software developer office of Uber outside of San Francisco was in Bulgaria, and that's quite a testament to the level of talent that you can find in Sofia. So it was natural for us to take advantage of this and base it in Bulgaria, because I studied in the US, my brother studied in the Netherlands. We could have done this elsewhere, but we needed to do it there because it's a very capital intensive project. And it requires really smart people, and we were able to find this in Bulgaria.
What a fantastic story. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Since you announced the Black Swan, what have been the highlights and what kind of reaction have you had to date?
Well, we announced the Black Swan several years ago, almost as soon as we started. And, a lot of startups, they pivot. It's part of their journey. They start with one idea, but then they hear feedback and then they need to readapt, readjust, reformat. We're the only company in the space that has never, changed what they started with, because it just has so much traction with what people need. From the very beginning, we focused on an aircraft that is cheap to produce, cheap to operate, and can carry the size of a small delivery van. So we just did our research early on and quite well, and it keeps being confirmed by people from all over the industry. We are IATA's only strategic partner for drones in the whole world, which is quite a testament as well. And we'll be testing with EasyJet next year in the UK and several big airlines in Asia and Africa. So in terms of commercial partnerships, I'm under some heavy NDAs, but I can tell you that there's quite a few people in both e-commerce and airline world that are very, very excited at the prospect of running an operation like that.
Wow, it sounds like we're going to have to keep in touch and get you back on here in a few months. I know NDAs can prevent you from talking about the real exciting stuff, so we will have to get you back on.
Hello.
But what is your grand vision for DRONAMICS over the next few years?
Our motto is delivering today, right? We want a world where you can have anything delivered today. Because when you look at what the online revolution has built, like Amazon and everyone else, they offer tremendous variety. Right, the long tail, things you cannot find in your neighborhood store, you can order them with a click. But then the challenge has always been fulfillment, delivering that. Because the moment you make a purchase, the money is out of your account already instantaneously, but you don't have the goods unless they're, unless it's a Kindle order. But yeah, in the physical world, the goods take time to get delivered. And I think that's something that people, especially in our generation, are increasingly intolerant of waiting. So we want everything on demand. We want everything today. There's a lot of benefits, again, in having same-day delivery. When you think how, someone in a big city, in those centers of commerce that are, sucking all the economic power from the other parts of the country, they have all these services that can make your life so much easier. And time is the only resource we cannot buy. So we all have the same life expectancy, but if you live in a city, you can do so much more. If you have to wait for everything to come around, are you living to the fullest extent, right? And why should you be, again, punished for the fact that you've chosen to live in a place that is not San Francisco, that is not London, that is not, New York? So the world that we see is that one where people are able to finally, apply their talents and not take a hit on their quality of life just by having chosen to live in a place that has 1,000 people or 10,000 people.
Well, a huge thank you for joining me today. Before I do let you go, could you just point the listeners in the direction of your website, social channels, and how they can reach out and contact a member of your team if they've got any additional questions about everything that we've talked about today?
Well, we have a website. It's DRONAMICS.com. If people are interested, they can leave us a note over there. They can drop us an email at hi@dronamics.com. We'll be very happy to continue a conversation, because it's a big vision and it needs all the help it can get. We know that this is the future. We know that this is where the world is headed, but we just want to get there faster, because we owe it to the world and everyone that this becomes a reality sooner, so that all these quality of life improvements can happen today, not tomorrow, not in 5 years, not in 10 years.
And I think you're going to do just that, because I'm not just saying this, but from everything that I've seen and the video footage, etc., the Black Swan is no ordinary drone. Like I said a few moments ago, it's an aircraft that could fundamentally change the shipping industry. And that is just something I love about how you're leveraging technology to do that. So I'd love to stay in touch, and we'll get you back on in a few months when some of those NDAs have been lifted. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to come and speak with me today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Neil. Thank you to everyone listening. And like I said, DRONAMICS.com, drop us a line. We're happy to chat. Thank you.
How cool is the Black Swan unmanned aircraft? I mean, lowering the cost of shipping in emerging markets. It's fully and semi-autonomous, fuel efficient, and satellite connectivity. I mean, it's incredibly powerful and valuable how tech is solving real-world problems all over the world, not to mention the huge partnerships waiting in the wings. Sorry for the pun there, I can't help myself. But seriously, I love what they're doing, and I'm going to be following this one very closely. And I also loved hearing about the startup culture in Bulgaria too, because I think it's so important that these stories get told, because this technology is changing the world all over the world, not just in Silicon Valley. So if you're listening and thinking there's not enough stories being shared about the great work being done in tech startup communities in your part of the world, please let me know all about it. And I would love to get you on the show too, and tell me the difference that your city is making to the world of tech too. And you should know all the contact details off by heart now, but one more time, techblogwriter.co.uk, email techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, just look for Neil C. Hughes. So on the blog post that accompanies this podcast episode, I will post videos of Black Swan in action so you can kind of see the huge difference that it's going to make. But that's it for today's episode. So all that's left for me to say is a big warm thank you for listening to this Daily Tech podcast. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.